Gweedore ADCRG agus Fáilte Road. Welcome to be my guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lear Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary, Clare's Wish Foundation in Limerick, and Deal Animal Welfare in West Limerick. And I was really nervous about that little bit of Irish there at the start, because my next wonderful guest is Marie Blair, from all the way from Donegal and the Gaeltacht part of Donegal in Gweedore. Hello, Anne-Marie.
Hello, Mary.
David. Anne-Marie, we're going to start with that. You're in a lovely, you're having your home renovated currently. So you're in a lovely place, which actually, looking at the background of it, it reminds me of when they did a series on Daniel O'Donnell. You're also from Gweedore, isn't he?
No, he's from Kincastle, the Rosses. Well, it's not too far away.
Not too far away.
And, no.
And they went out into an island off Kilcastle.
Yeah, Owie Island, that's right. Mm-hmm.
And they have a little house there that was his mother's. And
Yeah.
she goes there a lot, and they play cards, and it was where she told her parents that she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And it that whole feel looking behind you reminds me of that documentary and the little house that she went to.
Yeah, something similar. Something similar, I suppose, probably the same era. I'm sure this house is about maybe 120 years old or whatever, so but it's great now that it's my family use it to come on holiday too and that sort of thing. And last year when the pandemic hit, my son came home from Australia, and we were fortunate he was able to live up here while we were at home indoor, so.
But tell me, Anne-Marie, your Gaelic would be your first language. My mum was fluent at Irish. She did it in school. I didn't when I came home from England. I did it, but it wasn't spoken at home because my dad was English. So mum spoke English at home, but and so she lost her Irish. It's very important, I would imagine, to keep it up. And it was your first language since birth, even though you lived in Glasgow, in Scotland.
Glasgow. Yeah, I lived in Glasgow. Yeah, I lived in there's a huge connection between Donegal and Glasgow, the Gorbals, an area of Glasgow in particular. Yeah. And the boat used to leave from Glasgow to Derry, and but vice versa. And so people here, when there was no work for the winter time, they would head out to Derry, get the boat to Glasgow, and the Gorbals area is the nearest area, if you like. So the Donegal community settled there, and it wasn't both my parents are from the Gaeltacht, so it wasn't a conscious decision. It's just that they spoke Irish together in the house. It was in the days before TV. We didn't have a TV at the time. Any friends, family that were either staying with us, because often you'd put somebody up for a couple of weeks till they got sorted with accommodation. So anybody that was staying with us, visiting us, they were also Irish speakers. So it was only, I think I went into hospital when I was about 4 to have my tonsils removed. And it only dawned on them then that, oh Lord, that, she doesn't actually have English, So we had a quick change around, and English was spoken in the house then for me going to school. And so, but even the teachers in the school were well used to, if they were talking to the kids in the class, if I had a pain in my tummy, I would be referring to I have a pain in my bollock. I wouldn't know the English word for it, or you tell the teacher
very careful.
And, so, and even we had corner shops at the time, and they tended to be run by the Indian community in Glasgow, Indian and Pakistani, and they wouldn't it wouldn't be a supermarket, so you'd go in and ask for your shopping. And they very quickly learned how to say, do you need any Aaron today? What about Bonya? So they were very, quick in the uptake, and they had all the words.
Anyone who's listening now, Aaron, or we'd say Aran, down here in Munster, is bread. and
Vanya.
Vanya with milk.
Yeah. So as I say, it's I was lucky. It was carried with me, but it was I had to learn now to read and write it kind of thing, because it was I heard the spoken word all the time, but I hadn't and I would instinctively use the right grammar simply because it was spoken. And so now, when I was going to do my TCRG, I decided to no, I went to do my TCRG, the teaching qualification in Irish dancing, and I was living in Glasgow at the time, and we came to Dublin. My sister and I both did it together, and we came to Dublin to do it. And I heard, Dublin kids practicing their Irish sitting outside the room they were going in to do it. So I put my head around the door when they were finished, just before we came home, and I spoke to Seamus McAnalla, who was the
lovely,
beautiful, who was the
I have his
examiner at the time.
I have his mortuary card at home, and I often look at it. He was kindness in the midst of utter panic. He was level-headedness when you most needed somebody and you were stressed. He just had that. He didn't have to even speak, just to look at him. He was just an influence.
Yeah, oh, he was lovely. And I put my head around the door that day, and I spoke to him in Irish, and I said, I just wondered what is required for the Irish exam. And we had a conversation about it, all through Irish. And then he gave me a book, and he got me to read a bit of the book. Then he questioned me on it. And then he said, off you go, that's your Irish. Because I said, I must apply and do the Irish, just to have it. And he said, off you go, that's your Irish. You have your Irish, so.
Marie, I have to tell you that I would sound, if I was given 2 pages to learn off or 3 pages to learn off, I would convince you I was fluent, because the pronunciation would be fluent, and because I'd have a good ear for sounds and for pronunciation and that. But Orla Nibrian wrote my life story from the day I came back from England to the day my parents died, and how I worked in Bunratty. And I learned it off 4 pages. And I went in, and he asked me how I was. Hello, how are you? That's as far as the man got. 15 minutes later, I couldn't talking. And I said, I better stop now and look like I'm just thinking. And I saw him open his mouth to ask a question. And off I went again, because I didn't have a clue what he was asking me. And I saw him laugh and look at his watch, and he said, well, good. And 50 was the pass, and I got 50. I was a bit shocked. I should have at least got 54 for the
longevity.
And great memory and pronunciation should have at least got me.
Yeah, I think a lot as well. I think a lot of it is confidence. When you're speaking a language that's not your first language, it's really confidence, and it's not particularly not being afraid to sound silly. I mean, I'm doing a course at the moment called Gael Cara, and myself, Gael Cara. So I'm the pupil, and it's to sort of it's to help with the fluidity and the fluency, because I don't speak Irish that much anymore, because when I was working, my colleagues would speak Irish, and they were good. If I had to break into English to answer something, they didn't follow me into English. They kept with the Irish, But I gave up working there in September, and so I don't have the outlet, if you like, anymore. You might, you'd listen to radio in the Gaeltacht, whatever. But my husband and I don't speak Irish at home. So I have this.
Why ever not, Anne-Marie, when you go out?
Well, my husband has a mother from the Gaeltacht here, but his father was Scottish, so he never had the opportunity to learn it in the home. He's also from Scotland. We came here together, and so he would have a good working knowledge of Irish, with plenty of Irish, but lacking the confidence to use it, if you like,
Wouldn't you think that if you and he spoke Irish in the house all the time, and then of course when you're out in your daily lives you'd be speaking English, at least I know my friends children. It frustrates me so much. They're half Arabic. Their father is Arab, and their mother is obviously a red-headed Irish girl, and they always only spoke English at home, even when they were in Libya, but Arabic everywhere else. And you're sitting there talking, or like the other night, and next Mohammed and Nadia or Zahra Rania would end up talking, and I'm saying, have I forgotten English? What are they saying? Then I'd realize they've just gone into Arabic. So they switch from Arabic to English like that, and they sound so Irish when they're speaking English.
Yeah.
And so Arabic, and they speak Arabic.
Funny. I have two sons, and they were reared. I spoke Irish to them all the time when they were young, and sometimes, depending on which friends they were playing with, I would have to say to them, "Stad the canch berla, stop speaking English," And they genuinely didn't know. They used to say to me, "Jay Shaw, what's this is coming out now?" Or they didn't know what the difference was. They didn't understand that they were jumping from one language to the other, And as I say, now that they're away from home, they cling to the Irish more, if you like, I mean, my oldest son he worked in Scotland for a couple of years, and he was mixing with the Irish community in Scotland. And so in the flat that he shared, or at work, he was still speaking Irish because he shared a flat with people from home, and he worked with people from home. So it was still Irish at home in the flat and Irish out. It's funny, but
there is such a distinctive difference between all the different variations of Irish that's in the country. You can instantly, even though you mightn't know what somebody is saying from Donegal or from well, certainly from Donegal Irish compared to Munster Irish. The vowels tend to be kind of much more guttural and broader in Donegal, I would think, than they are certainly down in Munster.
I saw a very good program. I don't know if you know the comedian Des Bishop. He's an American.
He learned
New York Irish, but he learned it in Connemara, and he then did a gig in our local pub here when he came up, and he talked about the different sounds that he heard, and he reckoned that the Irish in Gweedore was very much mweni, kind of he said it was softer, and it was he didn't think it was as guttural as, say, Connemara, and he just thought, just a different, he sort of heard that going through the different Gaeltachts doing his gig, and he just said, it's just more just softer, and as if you're being stroked by the Irish kind of comparison to the
you say Gaelta and say Gaeltacht. So there, and it was Munster Irish, I suppose we all learned here, and it's one of my greatest regrets, Anne-Marie, is that I didn't learn Irish fluently. It is one of my great, that and French, because they're my French was one of my top two favorite subjects in school, but I'd need to be there about 6 months before I'd be fluent. Irish I liked, but I think we have a dismal way of teaching it in this country, of languages, and appalling. We come out after doing babies, senior infants, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and 4 years of secondary school. That's 12 years, and you come out of doing Irish in school, and all you're learning is the Mo Cnealach, the Aimsir Lárach, the Aimsir Cata, and all these verbs and learning everything off by rote. But if you were to be asked to have a conversation, you'd just freeze.
Yeah.
I personally think that our biggest mistake is that children aren't, that one, every school isn't compulsorily Irish. I just think that all the schools should teach Irish as a first language, and when they go out of school, then they can speak whatever language they want. But in school, it makes it so much easier for children to be brought up with the language rather than going into school, reading a book, reading Peg. For God's sake.
No.
I
used to attend classes in Glasgow. They have a Carnothic Gaelic in Glasgow. It was the first one that was ever opened after they left Dublin. You know, they opened one in Glasgow, and I used to go there, and I used to be saying the same thing to them with the things that we were reading, and then I say, good grief, they would be all about agriculturally based. You'd be all about, and it would be all about descriptions of the weather and that, lovely poetic language, but not practical, not practical for now, modern living,
Peg, what child could actually connect with Peg Sayers? Nobody, I don't think. I just think children should be given comics, all in Irish, shown cartoons,
top pop songs in Irish.
Playing crosswords, or having quizzes or competitions, or doing drama. Drama is, I think, a very good way of learning. Like Shakespeare, if you don't understand the dialogue or the English of Shakespeare, if you're acting it out, then you've got to learn what your part,
what it means,
what you're doing. And it makes it more interesting because you're not learning Shakespeare, you're learning a part for a play, and you're learning what is he saying and why is he saying that, and what emotion do I get from it. So you start to understand the language because it's playing the language rather than learning it. That's I just don't understand why we're doing it this way, Anne-Marie. That's why you're so fluent at Irish, is because it was ingrained in your psyche from your very first words.
Yeah, and sadly, I think I nearly think we have to ban it in the country in order for it to survive. I think with the kind of nature of the Irish person, if they're told they can't do something, they'll so if you say that's it, you can't. I mean, you saw that in Belfast. The Irish in Belfast at one stage was just, so strong, simply because it was part of their identity, and it was, during the sort of war up there was, it was that they became so fluent in it. There was a language called Gaelic, if you like, which they practiced coming out of the prisons, the jails. So as I say, maybe we take the method and the madness just to ban it and then take it from there, But
I don't know if you ever see, I'm sure you did, the documentary Jiggig, or no, the documentary Jig, and Rosetta McConmie was interviewed, and she put it as succinctly as anyone could possibly put it when she said, dancing was our life. It was, and I'm paraphrasing her now, it was their absolute life, because for so long the culture had been repressed. The Irish language, the Irish dance, the Irish music, the faith in this country. And as you say, when you're prevented from doing something, there's something in our Irish psyche that says, well, damn you, I'm going to do it even better because you tried to prevent me from doing it. And Rosetta really summed up beautifully the feeling of an entire people.
That's right.
Oppressed for so long that culture meant much more to them than down here, down in the south, where we were I suppose protected somewhat from all the troubles that were in the north, or violence. We didn't see guns, or we didn't see repression like that, but we are seeing now. When you see Gardaí going into a Catholic church and taking out a 91-year-old woman the other day from a church that could have fitted 80 people. What am I saying? 100 people, and there were 4 people in having mass, and the Gardaí went in and took out, I think there was about 5 people inside in mass. One 91-year-old woman standing up against the wall, terrified that she was going to be And I feel that that is going to have the reverse effect after COVID, and people are going to say, well, damn ye, you tried to prevent us from doing A, B, and C, and we're going to embrace it more. It's
Yeah,
our
they could do
in
it.
our DNA to rebel.
That's it, yeah. Well, I see with the online masses, there's much bigger attendance online than there ever was down there. You know, if they put up a mass online, you know, people that are sitting watching it, you know, you think, good Lord, you know, there wouldn't have been that amount of people actually attending, you know.
Yeah, I've interviewed a few priests, now a good few priests. Some of them Irish. Father Michael Johnson from London. He's an
Yeah,
Irish dancing teacher, and
right.
he's an adjudicator. And he was saying that there's thousands look in, but part of the Catholic faith, the major part of the Catholic faith is receiving the sacraments, which you can't do if it's online. And you know, I just think that people, certainly in this country, are going to say, well, you know, and you hear it a lot. I heard it in that video that they were showing somebody from some Irish organization saying to them, this hasn't happened since penal times in this country, that forces would enter a religious space to take people, 5 or 10 elderly people out of it. You know, no harm. They were spread out in a church that could have fitted 100 to 200 people. My cathedral fits over 1,000, and there's no one allowed in.
I know. Well, our priest has loudspeakers set up outside the church, and so the car park is full every time there's a mass on, and they listen to it out in the car park. And at one stage, he was coming out to the door and giving communion, but like that was stopped. It was reported to the Gardaí and stopped. You know, people would just leave their car, go over, get communion, back to the car, and drive off home.
And you know, Anne-Marie, I spent over a decade, I suppose, researching the impact of World War II on children and the generations afterwards. And I was only talking to a friend of mine the other day whose father is a survivor of 5 camps, including Auschwitz, and was a survivor. He's dead now. But we were saying the same thing. The last thing you want is for a government or anyone to turn neighbour against neighbour, such that they will go along. It happened here in Limerick at the Jesuits. There's young priests. They're doing the Tridentine Mass, and they were out in the street, set up a little altar, and everybody in O'Connell Street just all spread out. And one counselor was videoing it and ringing the Gardaí because, and there was another girl going over blaring the music into the crowd as poor misfortunes were just standing there praying. Do you know? And I mean, I just worry that people are being pitted against each other. It's all name and shame, and just, you know, and it's pitiful to see this 91-year-old woman petrified that she was going to get a fine that she couldn't pay. Do you know? And that's our psyche, that we will rebel as Irish people, and
I think too that while we're worrying about and reporting one another and all fixated on the pandemic and the fallout of it, meanwhile there's an awful lot of stuff quietly being done and passed, and you know that we're being distracted, if you like, you know.
That's what it is. It's a distraction, and anyone who doesn't think it, maybe I'm paranoid because of the area of research I did, but I can just see so many parallels, albeit, you know, there's nobody worried about going out and being taken in and killed and separated from families and that. But it all starts with everything starts with whispers and with people being alienated, and you're doing the right thing, and you're good now, you're doing the right thing, or you're the right person or the right type of person, whereas you're opposed to A, B, and C, so therefore you need to be reported. And you know, I mean, and anyone who would report on their neighbor like that, just shame on them.
Yeah.
But how do you think, getting back to the Irish, that you started walking, this walking club?
There's a course just on at the moment called Gael Cara, and I applied to it. I think it's really the people who run these Irish courses weren't doing many lessons this year, so they probably had funds left over to be used up. So what this is we started off doing it by Zoom, where we would sit and have an hour's conversation, and texting one another in Irish, and that sort of thing. And then as the weather got better, you could do it whatever way you wanted. You were literally to do 30 hours, and I take it there'll be a feedback and a report back at the end. But so I have a young girl, a local young girl who's tutoring me, if you like, and we go for a walk. So it's lovely because I'm getting to know her really well. She's a lovely, lovely girl, and she has beautiful Irish. You could just, beautiful Irish. And again, she was big into drama. So probably that's where it all, well, she also did a degree through we have a branch of the University of Ireland in Gweedore, and the courses are run through Irish. So she did, I can't remember which course she did, maybe translation, or I'm not sure. But anyway, she did a course through Irish. So her Irish is just gorgeous. And we have a bad habit in Gweedore of kind of, we'll say the English word and put a alta on, like, I can't think now of Neurotion Fairalture, and you're saying, come on, that's not a word, but we have a habit of throwing in those words. Now, I notice that whenever you're on the radio, or, if you're making you're speaking properly, they don't, but they do, because I used to notice it because I had learned Irish, if you like. I'd gone back and learned all the phrases that I didn't have, the modern stuff. And because I would ask my mother, what's the Irish for cooker? And she'd say, well, in our house it was chini, we cooked on the fire. What's the Irish for sink? She'd say, well, in ours it was skella, we didn't have a sink, we had a basin. So when I was going back learning all the modern words, then I would my kids would have the proper word for it, whereas here they would use the English word. Just kind of laziness. And I noticed as soon as they started going to school, that's where the English crept in, because there just would be households where English or Irish wasn't spoken in the house, and the kids did speak it when they had to at school, but chose in their downtime to speak in English, So and because they weren't aware this is what they were doing, because they literally didn't know which language they were speaking in. When I used to say stop speaking English, they just didn't understand what I meant, So but
just put too much heavy emphasis on the structures. I know I'm conscious of the fact that when anything that's being done, if it's got a good foundation, once you have the foundation in place, everything will stay and will function better when it's got a good foundation. Having said that, I think when it comes to a language, that to make it interesting for children to learn, the child like me that was in class that was always daydreaming, I mean, I was the child that only ever wanted, even though there was musical instruments in Wales that were going to be sent over for me, a piano, an accordion, you name it, it would have been sent for me. I was an only child. And it would have been sent, but all I wanted was dancing. And I'd spent the time underneath the table practicing. And the teachers used to say to my mother, Mary Jackman, she's a senator, Mary could be exceptionally bright. She's exceptionally bright, but she could be much better if she stopped looking out the window, counting the leaves on the trees.
Yeah.
Now, I was just bored with when it would come to the vocabulary, not the vocabulary. I was always good at the vocabulary, but the grammar and the structure of everything. I just wanted to get into it. It was the same with learning something. I never liked being at beginner's level at anything. I wasn't a beginner at anything. I had to just delve in and jumping. And I think there's children and adults like me who would have benefited from the Irish language if they could have learned it through, as I say, drama, or having film nights like they do in the Alliance Française, film nights, comedy nights, quiz nights, noughts and crosses even, or not noughts and crosses, but
we used to play Pictionary, and we'd ask in Irish, does it grow? What colour is it? You know, so you would have to get all those phrases, and you would be, you know, picking them up and using them without even realising you were learning something, you know. It's
and I think Irish is a language that shouldn't be graded, certainly in primary level, by whether you actually can understand the Aimsir Cata or the Aimsir Lárach or the Mocanílach or the you know,
I remember when my boys were young, and I had a neighbour's daughter was in, and I was saying to it was all girls in my house. It was 4 sisters, and I was saying to the boys, you know, Gasser why, and she was horrified at me. She was saying to me, "It's not Gasser why, it's Gissawai, Gasser why," you know, which I thought I for the first time are having to talk to boys as good boys. Like we never had any boys, so we only heard in the house Gissawai, you know. We heard it with the, what would you call that, genitive case, Gissawai with the H, you know, whereas Gasser Y. And she was just, you know, kind of, she couldn't understand that you know, why was I getting that wrong, you know? And I was saying to her, well, I just had never heard the male version of it, you know, in the house.
Is Wa, MHAITH?
Yes, yes.
See, that's
different.
Gasoon Wa, we'd say here.
Yeah, and then like that, my mum was here on holiday when the boys were quite young, and so Gweedore, there's Gweedore in the middle, and there's the Rosses on one side of us, sort of Dunlow and Castle and Ranafast, and then on the other side is Gortahork and Polcara, you know, all sort of Gaeltachts. And so my kids were often away with my next door neighbour who comes from Ranafast, and so my 2 neighbours both were from Ranafast. So when the boys were picking up words in their house and coming back in, my mother was saying to me, why are they using Ranafast words? You know, sort of, she immediately caught, even though it was words we used in Gweedore, but we pronounced them slightly differently. And it's the same with, and I was a long time before I could recognise that. You know, I was down listening to a play, and I would hone in on one of the actresses and say, oh, she's from Cloughaneely, is she? And I would be amazed that I had picked that up, you know, because in the beginning I was saying to my mother, oh, how can you tell the difference? It's all the same Ulster Irish. And she was, oh, you can tell a mile away. So, you know, they had picked up the words from my neighbours, the mums in the neighbouring houses. And she picked it up straight away when she was sitting listening to the boys talking. God, they're using Ranafast words. And and as I say, it was quite a few years later before, when I was listening to a play, or down in, we have a lovely theatre, Clan Gweedore, quite a famous theatre in theatre circles in Irish, if you like, but it's all Irish. All the it was given to the land was given to the people of Gweedore in 1966. 50 years, it was a 50 years monument, a living monument for the 1916 Rising. And so the theatre was built there because there was already a very busy group of actors in the area. And so we recently, about 3 years ago, we recently renovated it all and refurbished it all, and it's very vibrant again, or it was until lockdown. So I would be involved in that, in the sense that we set up a charity group, a costume, and we get together. And the first thing we did was Cossanerja, which is, well, Cossanerja, you would talk about horses when they're galloping, Cossanerja, or if you're having a rest, you're putting your feet up, Cossanerja. So, but we were doing it as a sort of Strictly Come Dancing.
Feet
Cos in the erja, Cossanerja.
year.
Yeah.
In Orja. And you see,
CO
we'd say in Orja. You say in
in
Orja.
Erja. Yeah,
And
yeah.
they're saying, but do you know something? I'm actually learning things from you, Anne Marie. That I'm learning that I actually am not so thick at Irish. I understand things.
Yeah, you wouldn't be long coming back in it at all if
My
you just.
poor father, God love him, he was hard to understand in English because he spoke very, very quietly, and my mum was deaf, and just before she died, she went completely deaf and lost her voice as well from radium treatment. So, but she used to say to me, "What's your father saying?" They were speaking English, and she'd look at me and she'd say, "Mary, what's your father saying?" And Dad would have to, I'd have to tell because he had a very quiet Welsh English accent, but he was trying to learn. He'd come out and he'd say something that he heard Anne Doyle on the TV say, and it would be nothing like what Anne Doyle would say, and she had no patience, and she'd say, "Oh, just show this, bring me in the next time it's on," because he'd be mad to learn.
Yeah, yeah.
Welsh accent. It, like, if she couldn't understand him when he was speaking English, she was never going to understand him speaking Irish with a Welsh English accent.
Yeah. And James Smith, I did James Smith's speech one time, adjudicated him. He lives in Wales and he's from Belfast originally, but like that, I'll send him birthday greetings in Irish. He'll send them back to me in Welsh, He hops in and out of a couple of versions.
He's not far from where we're from. We're from, my father's people are from Pontypridd and Tunapandy, which would be the Morgan in South Wales. Claim to fame is that we lived 2 doors away from Tom Jones. His mother and my grandmother, my great grandmother and his mother were friends, and he used to go down every morning and he'd ring his girlfriend on the telephone box. Became his wife then, and when they were getting rid of the telephone box, he bought it and brought it to his home in America and had it put into the garden. But yeah, Tunapandy and Pontypridd.
Right.
So, and you're in Scotland. So between us, we have the real Gaelic, real Gaelic. But did you find that your Irish was impacted so much more by another Gaelic, if you like, the Welsh Gaelic, which is quite similar, very similar to Irish, the Scotch Gaelic, I should say, is very similar to I would imagine, to the Irish Gaelic. But,
it is, yeah.
And your parents being from Donegal and you being from Scotland, the language isn't too dissimilar either. But I'm wondering how that actually translated with a Scottish girl speaking fluent Irish with Donegal parents.
Well, the local community centre in where I live, in New Poetic, they have a cross border with the Scots. Well, it's Ulster Scots, but they also have connections with the Gaelic, the Scots Gaelic from the Isle of Skye. And my mother and father used to socialise in a pub with the staff there were from the islands, and they used to, they could make themselves understood. It's like, I suppose, somebody with broad Liverpudlian speaking to Aberdonian, or quite a difference in the dialects, but they could certainly follow the.
What they say about Scottish people, that they're Irish people who could swim.
Well, that's all possible. Yeah. My son teaches in a Gaels school in Meath and Trim, and he did his teacher training through Irish.
Yeah,
but he would have preferred to take a topic that they specialise in, and he intended taking Chirolis geography because that was his big interest. But they didn't teach geography through Irish in the college, so he couldn't take it up because he said Teutonic plates and all those phrases, he had them in Irish, but he didn't have them in English. And he said it was a kind of a lip service to the Irish language, you know,
because I was saying to you when you were telling me that the other day, my cousin, a relative, Sinead, she was wanting, she was in a Gael school since primary and secondary in Laurel Hill, Coloista, and she wanted to do law, and she was getting A's and everything up to her. She had brittle bones, so she broke her wrists the night before the Leaving Cert exam. She fell off a bicycle and broke both wrists, and so they got in somebody in to actually type out everything that she wanted to say, but the person they brought in had no Irish, so she had to do her exams in English, and she really didn't have. I mean, she spoke English all the time at home, because her parents were brought up in England. Her father was born in England, or both are, and so she just spoke English all the time, but she didn't have written really English. Everything was done through Irish, so she had to go back and repeat the following week in Irish again, so that she'd get, because she just missed out the first time round for law, but then she went on and did a master's in it, but in English. In English, but that's why I really do think that it should be compulsory that all schools, every school in this country, especially when we need Irish to get a Leaving Cert, they should at least give every child a level playing field, which they don't. I mean, our constitution states that all children should be treated equally. Well, they're not, because if you have a child that goes to a primary school whose parents are maybe from a deprived, or their family are from a deprived area, that whom parents may not have even gone to school themselves, so they have difficulty maybe helping them with their English, let alone their Irish at home. There should be the facilities there that children learn it in school every day with their peers, and that there's after schools programs to help every child, so that every child has that level playing field, which they don't have. We're not treating all children equally in this country.
No,
definitely
not. You know, and my brother-in-law in Scotland, who's living in Glasgow, is a teacher in Glasgow, and he learned Scottish Gaelic. He has Irish Gaelic, but he learned the Scottish Gaelic. You know, he was able to cross over, and he took it. So he taught the kids it. Then he had classes for the auxiliary staff, like the dinner ladies and the cleaners and the other teachers that wanted to learn, and any parents. And he got an award that previously only schools in a Gaelic speaking area got, because on the day that the Kikera came out, the inspectors came out, the dinner ladies and the cleaners were on a smoke break, standing outside, and they started shouting at the inspectors in jest, like, but shouting abuse at them, but all in Gaelic. And so they were so impressed. And he'd gone to the local shops and he got them to put up the signs in Gaelic for the various bread, milk, whatever, round the shop as well. And the shopkeeper attended the lessons, and he was able to put up a sign saying Gaelic is spoken here if you prefer.
That's another way that Irish language could be taught, is through comedy, through jokes.
Big time. Yeah.
I mean, doing comedy. I mean, he was an American who went off and I think in 6 months became fluent in Irish because he completely embraced it. I think I would be if I actually applied myself and decided to go to the Aran Islands or to Gaeltacht and spend 6 months there, because I like language. I think if you like something, you're going to learn it that bit more. And one thing I do love about the name Gweedore is there's a musical ring to it. There's a poetic ring to the name Gweedore. It it isn't rough, it isn't guttural. It is, as your friend said, there's a, or as Des Bishop, wasn't it, who said, there's a kind of a welcoming.
If you're patting a child, you're saying mweni, mweni, or I think some people say bweni, bweni, if you're patting a dog or a child, and that's the way he said he felt that the language in Gweedore was, So
is that where he learned it? In
no,
Gweedore?
he learned in Connemara. He learned it in Connemara. Totally immersed with the family in Connemara, and but then he did gigs. He did one in Vicar Street, and he did one in the local pub, Cutie Bigs in Gweedore, kind of thing. So
good. I mean, is his Irish very good?
Oh, excellent. I mean, he then went to China and did the same with Mandarins. So so I mean, he's
proved that if you want to do it, you can do it. He went off to China.
Totally. But again, it's confidence. It's not being afraid to sound silly, if they correct you, fine, great, because the girl who was out with me in the beginning, I would send her a text. I would say, send that back to me now, corrected. And she'd say, oh, I'm loath to do that because you've made yourself understood. And I say, but that's why I would prefer, I don't mind not being right, but I prefer to be right, so.
When I was working, when I was dancer at Bunratty Castle, and the French people used to come, and I used to do the speeches in French. And of course, I'd have it prepared. So once it was prepared, I would know that my pronunciation would be grand. But sometimes I had a tendency, and I still do, of putting everything into the present tense rather than into the future and the future and the passé, the passé. But they'd come up, the French would come up, and the Parisians had no problem. They'd come straight in and they'd correct you straight away. Yeah. And I loved that.
Yeah, that's how you learn.
Because people were delighted you were making an effort. And you're never going to learn unless you're corrected. But my mother used to do my Irish for me to school because she'd get so impatient, and she'd sit down and she'd end up writing the essay. And the nun, Sister Kevin and Sister Dorothy, they used to send for her and they'd say, Maura, you really must. My mother's name was Myra, but they used to always call her Maura because she went to school, the same school.
And my mother's name was also what we called it, Moya.
Moya.
It sounds like M-O-Y-A, Moya,
My mum was M-Y-R-A. She was baptized Mary, but she was called Myra, and then the nuns called her Maura. And she had a limp all her life from a dislocated hip that she never had put back in because her grandmother wouldn't let her mother get the operation done. She didn't think the doctors were up enough, and Mammy was so small. But anyway, she went her whole life. But she'd say, oh, for God's sake, I've got to go down again. What did you do? And she'd walk down to the school because the nun would send a note, could you come down, Maura? You're going to have to stop doing Mary's homework, her Irish. And she'd say, I'm sorry, sister, is my Irish rusty? And they'd say, no, your spelling is. Because my whole paper would be si chez vous.
Oh, yeah.
And they knew straight away that, I was post the chez vous, I was PH. And it was littered with si chez vous.
Yeah. I see the local politicians' office. It's Offig Kinfane, but it's not with the H, it's the S with the tube above it, just because it looks nicer, if you like, than the SH, so because you were looking at it thinking that's the genitive cases, the office of Sinn Féin, so but they got around that by just putting the dots over the S kind of thing. So
it's S-A-V-O. I-N-N-F-E-I-N.
It was just S-I-N-N, S-I-N-N, but the S had the dot above it to make it grammatically correct.
But my mum's, her godson was Cathal, is his name. And everyone spelled his name C-A-T-H-A-L. except my mum, because she was so full of airs and graces. But so permanent. She always spelled it Chevu, or Catal, with a dot over the A.
Yeah,
So it's Chevu, Tal, and everyone else used to spell it
right.
um, and she used to take great pride in the fact that she was the only one who was spelling it properly.
Yeah. I suppose before it changed, there was no H, kind of. Yeah.
Oh, she still kept on the H,
Yeah.
the chevu, and
Yeah.
got me in so much trouble all the time because I could never bring in an essay into school or anything. But she did go down to the nun. The only nun I ever had really problems with was in secondary school, and she marked my paper down because I wrote Cork a Millish in my paper. And
Hmm.
she said she crossed it out with big red, and she said it's quiche de millish. So my mum went down and she had enough, and she said, sister, she said, there's nothing incorrect about cork millish, quiche de millish. It's exactly the same thing. And she actually she my mother was only about half her size, but she I suppose she thought that I would have a mother that wouldn't dream of going down to the nun and having the temerity to correct her on Irish. What would you say, Cork or Quiche?
Keke.
Which is Corca with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Corca.
Yeah.
They brought in this quiche de millish instead of,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
see,
I think quiche would be more like baking, sort of baking rather. Well, I
Corca
don't really know,
was
but
it. Corca
keke
was,
would be cake, would be cake,
yeah,
kakar cake. Yeah.
yeah.
But,
And,
but
and
I would have thought quiche was more like baking, like baked goods, or, but I don't know. As I say,
oh,
I'm only going by
this,
instinct.
this nun was the dread of nearly everybody, really, because I loved every nun I had in school, and I even
Mm.
her, but she just didn't like me because one, I was small. She used to
Mm.
always get me to rub out the everything on the top of the board, so which meant I had to get a chair to stand on, and everyone would start laughing. And she'd get my friend who rowed for Ireland, who was 6 foot even in first year in secondary, to rub out the normal part,
All
but
right.
Mary had to get the chair to stand up on. And also, I was an only child, which for some reason or other, I think she thought spoiled. And
Yeah.
above all, my father's people were Protestants, and that was like, and English. So it was like
Yeah.
I had it. I was wrong in every way.
I don't think it was you that was wrong.
I was wrong. Everything about me was wrong. You know,
Yeah.
but it was just. So it's been delightful. But you got involved. We'll talk just quickly about Irish dancing. How did you
Mm.
get involved in the dancing? And
Well, like that, my mother, there's a little town land where I live, where I'm staying at the moment, called Slehan, and all the families are all related, and in each house, funnily enough, there was like 3 girls and 6 boys, and 3 girls and 6 in 3 or 4 houses down, but the girls were all blonde haired and great dancers. In the sense of when the dance halls came in, my mother used to lead the floor, so they were known as the Slehan dancers. The that sort of thing. But so when we went to Glasgow, when we lived in Glasgow, and as soon as the my mother heard there were dancing classes, and there was a big choice of dancing classes, but they were on in our local hall, our local school, and the lady who taught me was a Glasgow girl. She was a ballet dancer first and foremost. She'd taken up later in life, taken up Irish dancing. She had no Irish connections whatsoever. Her name was Frances Teese. She went on. She won the. There was no world in those days, but she won the All Ireland or the Father Matthews Page every year for 3 years from when she was 15 till she was 18. And when she was 18, they said to her, would you like to be a teacher now? You are a teacher. She never did a TCRG exam. She thinks that she thinks that she was actually keeping somebody who they hoped would win the All Ireland out. You know, she says maybe an Irish girl that, you know, and so they sort of gifted her with the TCRG. And she opened a school then in London, and then she taught along with Ted Kavanagh in London, and then she came to Glasgow. She settled in Glasgow, and she taught there. So she taught there for a long time. Glasgow City Council gave her, I was over at the 50th, that she was 50 years a teacher, or 50 years teaching, they were recognizing her for. And at 70 years of age and 20 a day smoker, a minimum 20 a day smoker, she got up and danced a beautiful slip jig, you know, just amazing, kind of, you know. So Frances Teese anyway, who was this, I mean, a lot of the mothers in her class would all have been speaking Irish, you know, but so I got into it that way. We started lessons then, and there were 4 girls in the house, and we all danced. And then when I was about 16 or 17, I gave it up. I was working and away doing other things, and couldn't get out at weekends to facias, so I gave it up about that age. And then I decided to do my TCRG when I was in my early 20s. And so I went back to the class, but Owen Macaulay had joined Frances at that time, and he was teaching figures. So I actually did a couple of years of, you know, dancing in a team, Cayley teams and figure teams, and we were competing, and we were traveling around as adults and going to Dublin and London and, you know, all the different facias. So we had a great couple of years doing that. And then when that finished, I did my TCRG, as I say, along with my sister, and we both got that. I was then married, and I was living in a little mining village between Glasgow and Edinburgh, and I opened a school out there, and my sister was teaching in Glasgow. So that went on for the 10 years that I lived there. Then we decided to move back to Ireland, and I came back to Ireland and opened a class locally and taught here for many years, but had 2 sons who were not remotely interested in Irish dancing, were with me at all the classes because my husband would be working. Often I would have them with me.
Is it sad when that happens? I'd imagine.
I actually, there was a girl who used to help me teach, and she was like myself. She came from Glasgow. She danced for Donegal in Glasgow. She danced for Grace McNulty. And we both had 2 sons, and we'd be standing down at the side of a GA pitch saying, this wasn't what we envisaged. You know, we thought we'd be at the side of a stage.
I know, I just think that if I had a child and if I had a girl, I mean, your dream would be to have a little girl that you'd be able to put into a costume and have all the things that my mother was so fanatical about costumes and about.
Yeah.
She was known for this. I mean, she was obsessive compulsive about everything. She'd have about 20 pairs of socks, 20 pairs of panties. Your costume would be covered with an apron. Before aprons ever came in, you had aprons made to keep the costume clean, and you'd only put it on about 10 minutes before you go up on stage, and it was like unveiling if you got a new costume like it is now. You wouldn't be allowed to unzip the costume until going on stage if you had a new costume. I'm telling you, her nickname was Hyacinth, because she was just so she was so prim and proper. Every time I hear Hyacinth saying, the lady of the house speaking, I think of my mother. They all say that's Myra to a T. You know, she was just so prim and proper, and except that she'd always make you. She wouldn't be like Hyacinth with minding the Royal Doulton, but with periwinkles. But she'd be, I mean, Lord rest my father. When he died, my uncle came home from England, and my 2 aunts were sitting in the sitting room. And I can still vividly remember, as destroyed as we were, I can remember the look my mum was giving over at my uncle because his coat was down on the ground beside him. on, and he was messing. And in the height of it, he was sitting. He sat on my dad's seat that he always sat on, and he was the image of my father. And close your eyes, and they sound exactly the same. It was scary enough. But I knew she was looking at the coat on the ground and thinking, would they ever go down to my cousin Muriel's house, and and because my house, I'm depressed enough, but my house now is messed with the coat, which should be hung up.
Yeah.
It's just it's the things that come through your head when
Right. Yeah.
you think of this,
Different memories. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just everything. And I would have loved to have had a little girl that I would never have been like that, but that you dress up in a costume,
of course,
go
yeah.
stage.
Yeah, well, Bernie and I used to be saying the same thing. We have and it's funny too, because I used to think that people in Irish dancing were just mad, just the whole setup was just mad, that the lengths we went to and the sort of the way we let it take over our lives. But having two sons and the GA, no matter what hobby you are, when you take it to the lens that you must be the type of person you are or whatever. I used to see it with the boys too, and if they were buying new football boots and I would kind of comment on the price of them, I got no, they would say, "Hi, listen, if it was a pair of dancing shoes, we no word of the price of them."
Twice about if they were a girl, you'd be flying them. You'd be flying them. Imagine all the places you'd be going with them now, instead of a GA hall in Gweedore. Or a GA pitch in Gweedore. You could be off in America or Australia with the dancing.
Oh, I know. There's no limit to it. And I was out the last time I was judging. I did the qualifying out in Kentucky, and on the panel was also Wayne Gagan from Dublin.
She's lovely.
She's lovely, and like that she straight over and Tagali Kogitsa, as Gweedore too, and we were having this lovely conversation out in Kentucky in Irish kind of thing, it was just lovely.
Lovely. We were on this thing, this talent kind of Irish dancing Zoom thing that the commission ran there recently, and everyone you could do any kind of an act that you wanted to do.
Just lovely,
and I sang the Isle of Innisfree with this background.
Right.
And I sang it, and Maura Vicagon came in privately to me, and she said she passed a lovely compliment, and it meant so much, and about the song and about the way it was sung, and that it was kind of like real Irish the way it was sung, and and I just thought it was because you when you're out of your comfort zone and you can dance and everything like that, but when you're singing, I was lucky I recorded it, because I wouldn't have been able to do it in front. While they were playing it, I was nearly down under the table with embarrassment. Laura made me feel good.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's. But I think that, I suppose maybe a lot of hobbies do, but when I, in other walks of life now, to walk out in the middle of a stage, in the middle of an audience, doesn't cost you a thought, because you've done it so often, patience. You've walked out and you've announced this or that, or you've made a speech. Sometimes you're judging, they ask you to speak to the kids, and it doesn't turn a hair on you, And now I would be involved now in a lot of, as I say, we do a lot of shows for local charities, and so it's amazing getting the likes of the local sergeant or the local priest in these plays and doing them, and I remember at one stage we had our local the Donegal team reached the All-Ireland finals, both at minor level and at senior level there a few years ago. So they played in Croke Park in front of 80,000 people, and I had 8, so 6 of them were from Gweedore, 6 of the Donegal minor team were from Gweedore. So I had 8 of the team dancing, this sort of spoof river dance where they all, so we taught them that. And I had to go round every one of their houses, myself and another girl went round all the houses and spoke to them and their mummies to make sure they would come. And anyway, they came. And you could only practice with them for about 10, 15 minutes because their boredom threshold was just so low, you know, and they would just, you would look around and they'd be playing strip basketball in the background when you're trying to figure out the music or whatever, you know. But the night that we were performing the first time, they were throwing up.
Over that there, Anne-Marie, strip basketball.
Well,
I've heard of it.
as I say, I had to turn around and I said, here's a sentence I never thought I would say. Stop that and put your clothes back on again. Stop that and put your clothes back on again till we do this dance, you know.
Never heard of it.
But we had great fun with them, but they were thrown up in the back room before they went on to do this dance. And I was saying, you played football last week or last month in front of 80,000 people, and they would say, yeah, but we knew what we were doing. You know, we knew the steps.
But do you think, Anne-Marie, that being involved in something like any area of the arts, whether it's Irish dancing or any form of dance or drama or anything like that, that it helps you navigate life in a way that that other areas of life don't, like football or soccer or GA, or that if you're involved in any form of the arts, it helps you to say to yourself, well, people get the wrong impression about you as well. They think you come across as being confident. You could be dying inside, but you have this mentality of fake it till you make it, and go out there and cover up. You know, we're constantly told from the age of 4, it doesn't matter if you're nervous, go out and look confident, because the minute you walk out on stage, you're supposed to project this image of, I'm the person that you're to look at now, while watch me, and this presence. And you know, we're all I don't think there's anybody, especially in the arts, in any form, that's not without their demons, that doesn't die 100 deaths before they go out on stage, but then once they're on stage, it's a completely different matter. I was terrified until with excitement, waiting to get on the stage, and I was fine once it was on, and the bigger the audience, the better.
Yeah. No, it's fine. And I think as well, you do these things in front of strangers much easily. If you're walking out onto a stage and you don't know the audience, if you walk out and the audience is all your friends and your relatives, it's a wee bit harder, you know. But again, it comes down to, you know, you can't teach kids that shyness is such a waste of time and energy, but you just wish you could. I wish it was one of the lessons they taught in school about, you know, about handling shyness, and I wish they taught it young enough, you know, because it's such a waste of time. You know, fine, you've been standing there maybe trying to make small talk when you were younger with people or various things, and it was such a struggle, you know. Whereas when you're older, you know, you don't care. You've been there, done that, you know, don't care. I
always came across as being incredibly confident, and, you know, I suppose an only child, you were around adults all the time, and your level of conversation was much more mature than your peers, because they had 5 and 6 or 7 in the family, and the parents just wanted them to go out and play, or they didn't have the time to be answering constant questions like I would be asking. But I can remember the absolute fear of walking down to the end of my road, even up to my 20s. If I saw a group standing at the end of the road, I can still remember walking down and fiddling with my hair or fiddling with something just to focus my attention away from the fact that there was people there, and I felt they were going to be making fun of me or laughing at me because they had this, but yet I could go up on a stage in front of 1,000 people and perform. And but I was more comfortable on a one-to-one basis with people than
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
group on outside of dancing. Dancing, you know, you go up on stage, you do what you know, you've been brought up. It's like you with Irish. It's just innate in you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Perform,
Yeah,
and but not on a level where you can be in a group of people and feel you've come away without feeling, oh shoot,
mm-hmm.
I probably said too much, or I didn't say
Yeah,
enough, or that. But you
yeah.
know, we learn to cover up when we need to,
Of course, yeah, yeah. You have
because
coping methods.
yeah. Well, Michael Dillon told me that you'd be absolutely fascinating to interview. He said you have to get Anne Marie Blair on, and I thought, you know, it was going to go down the road. We were going to be going down the road of the Irish dancing and what life was really like, but it was just far more than the one dimensionality of being involved in an
Yeah.
activity. I mean, I didn't
Mhm.
think we'd be going down. I certainly didn't think I'd be talking about the Irish language, because we have such a fear of the language. A
Well,
lot of it.
I understood from when you first contacted me that when you suggested the interview, I was thinking, right, I must get thinking about the kind of things but I thought it was going to be in Irish, you know, and I was saying I better get, you know, get the fluency there
God,
kind of thing. So
wash your tongue out. Honestly, Anne Marie, I would just give anything if I was able to do that.
well, as I say, it's only a case of deciding, and
I
then
just
you
look at people and I have this language envy.
yeah,
When I think, oh God, you know, and I know it only takes about 6 months of saying, that's it, off to the
yeah,
Aran Islands for
yeah.
6. I went to the Aran Islands once with Catherine Coleman's sister.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know Catherine?
I do, yeah, yeah. I think
Catherine's.
the very first face I judged, she was in the same panel years ago.
I
Yeah.
didn't know Catherine at the time, but I
Mm,
worked in Bunratty with her sister Noreen, and
mm,
Noreen was the harpist there. She was home from Australia on a trip,
mm.
and staying for 6 months with her grandfather
Oh, yeah.
in Mayo,
Mm,
and or no, Clare actually, and I became very friendly with Noreen, and Noreen said her sister was a dancing teacher.
right.
But when I was judging with what Catherine one day in Dublin, Mary McAleese's fesh, and she
Mm.
just happened to say my sister Noreen, and I thought, oh my God, I can't believe
Aye.
Noreen and I went to the Aran Islands, and she
Yeah.
had to steer me. It was like a Frank O'Connor play, because she
Yeah.
had to steer me across, because I got sick the whole way across on the Happy Hooker
All right.
ferry, and I had to go to bed when I went over. But we had a fabulous time
Mm.
in the Aran Islands in a sheer,
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And I know if I went there for about 6 months, I'd be fluent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's it. That no, there's a huge, because I remember going down to County Clare to judge a fish one time, and I was introduced as Anne Marie Blair from Donegal, and then they asked me to, you know, speak to the kids, you know, the usual. If the adjudicator says it is written in stone, whereas the teacher said it to those kids every week about practicing, and you know they don't pay any heed. So anyway, I went up to do the usual, give the little talk. And when I came back down, there was a girl waiting at the bottom of the stage steps, and she said to me, "They introduced you as being from Donegal, but you have a Glasgow accent." And I said, "Yeah, I'm actually from Glasgow." And she was saying, "Oh my God," she said, "I'm living in Clare for 12 years now. I've never met anybody from Glasgow since." I couldn't believe. I said, "Well, you need to come to Donegal then, because every second person's from Glasgow, you know, or their previous generation or the next generation was all Glasgow." And then, of course, she started saying that she'd moved home, that she'd moved home. Her husband had been in business, in a light engineering business in Scotland, and him and his partner had split up. And
I was trying
what's
to
that?
park, I was trying to park the car there on this online parking thing, and not a signal that was ever known on this phone.
Oh, really?
We're in a basement, and it's just, I'm just thinking, you know, you're supposed to have fast speed broadband, and you
Oh,
can't get it
yeah,
on your phone. It's just
I know.
insane.
Dreadful. Yeah.
But are you disappointed that the conversation wasn't in Irish?
Oh no, not at all. No, no, because it's not at all. As I say, it's your conversation is just lovely, and especially in these times when we don't see anyone very much, kind of thing, you know.
But
No, no,
it's good for our colleagues as well, I suppose, in the Irish dancing to see, I suppose, another side of people of Marie Blair, who they mightn't have known. They'd known you as a teacher
yeah,
and as an adjudicator. But listening into this, they'd find out the nuances that everyone has to their lives. They're much more than the one-dimensional image
good,
that people have of them being maybe in Gweedore, of being a mother, of being a wife, of being an Irish Gaelgore.
mm,
Those in Gweedore will see you now as the teacher and the dancer and the Scot and and all you know, things that you'd never get to know from people just seeing them at a fesh
that's true. Yeah, that's true.
or seeing them walking past you every day on the Gael Cara.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So now
So thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for being my guest today.
you're
So,
welcome. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
and really, it's one of my favorite interviews because it just took a direction I didn't think it was going to go.
Good, good.
And,
Well, as I say, yeah, we have a local festival here called Sult, SULT, because it's from one May Sultas. I enjoyed that.
thank you very much. Shindera Leshon. Oh, here we go now with my little bit of Irish. You can tell me if it was right or wrong. But
Oh,
Shindera Leshon Clor, that's the end of the show for today until the same time or the next time Lacuna of Day. But while I'm to galer Chicana Sonas Agus Gro Agus Gade Shiv Slán. Gade
Slán.
Shiv